Okay, members, can you please take your seats so we can get started? So welcome everyone to the Monday, October 21st caucus and work session prior to our regular meeting of the Albany Common Council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll, or Mr. Jimenez.
Adams, Anane, Valerian,
Here.
Clark, Farrell,
Here.
Flynn, Frederick,
Here.
Hoey,
Here.
Johnson.
Here. Did you say Johnson?
Keegan is absent. Kimbrough,
Here.
Love,
Here.
Robinson, Romero, and Zamer.
Here.
11 present. We are also joined by City Clerk Shaniqua Jackson, Research Counsel Jake Iceland, Assistant Corporation Counsel Jason Thomas, Legislative Director Brian Jimenez, and Junior Policy Analyst Alyssa Kamara.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jimenez. We're also joined by Councilmember Joyce Love, pursuant to Local Law E of 2022, and in the code it falls under Section 34-4, the video conferencing session of the code. All right, so we're going to start out with two public hearings. The first is on ordinance 28, 21, 24. It's the budget ordinance for 2025. Next public hearing is 28, 21, 24 by Mr. Valerian. It's a resolution of the council authorizing the execution of the finance agreement with Spectrum. That's 28, 21, 24. Moving on to local laws. For local laws introduced, we'll have Local Law K of 2024 by Ms. Frederick. It's local law overriding the tax levy limit law for fiscal year 2025. That's going to finance. Then next, on to ordinances. We got Mr. Flynn's ordinance 29-102-24. It's an ordinance amending. It has to do with utility pole regulations. It's set up to ensure the quick and effective removal of double poles. That's going to be a referral to the Council's General Services Committee. Then next, we'll have the bonding ordinances by Ms. Frederick on behalf of Finance. So we're talking ordinance 30-102-24 through ordinance 64-102-24. And those will all be referrals to the Council's Finance Committee. Next. Resolutions introduced. We've got Mr. Anani. Is Resolution 117-102-24R. It's a resolution of the Council declaring October 20th, 2024 Community Media Day. We'll be voting on that. I believe traditionally, we've all been co-sponsors. Next, also by Mr. Anani, Resolution 118-102-24. It's a resolution of council declaring October 21st, 2024 through October 27th as Free Speech Week in the city of Albany. Again, all co-sponsors. Next, Mr. Hoey's Resolution 119-102-24. It's a resolution of council appointing Emily Sowick as a member of the Community Police Review Board. It's going to be a referral to the Council's Public Safety Committee. The next, also by Mr. Hoey, Resolution 120-102-24R. It's a resolution of the Council reappointing Milton Arroyo as a member of the Community Police Review Board. And next, by Mr. Romero, Resolution 121-102-24. It's a resolution of council urging New York State government to pass a budget in 2025 that raises taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers and fund investments. You'll have to let, I believe you reached out to everyone, right, to see who wanted to co-sponsor that or no? We'll do a voice vote anyways, so it doesn't matter. That's fine. All right. Then resolutions held. She's not going to be here. It's by Ms. Keegan. It's Resolution 5453-24R. It's a resolution of council encouraging our community to support the Equal Rights Amendment. I'm going to ask that Mr. Flynn, can you handle that for me? Introduce.
Councilmember Keegan had asked if Councilmember Zamer would do it, and I believe Councilmember Zamer has remarks.
That's fine. Councilmember Keegan's Resolution 5453-24 is Ms. Zamer. And also, last resolutions by Ms. Frederick, 107-101-24R. It's a resolution of the council approving the transfer of budgeted funds that will affect the change in authorized positions. That's in the police department, and that's APD and AFD. So, is that, you guys discussed it in finance? And
yes, it voted out of committee unanimously with a positive recommendation.
okay. So that's the last bit of legislation. All right. We do, which you have, Mr. President, you have the Commissioner Deeds. There's one Commissioner Deeds, and that we get together the appointment for Mr. Hoey.
Yeah, I know there's one Commissioner of Deeds appointment and then one appointment to the Violence Prevention Task Force for the miscellaneous business section.
Okay. Okay. Anyone have anything? Mr. Hoey.
Yeah, on the way in, I noticed the Palace Theater is lively tonight with the Rocky Horror Picture Show returning to Albany, and a lot of people dressed up for that. It's a Halloween event, I guess, but it's good to see. And if I would have known soon, I would have put a resolution thanking them for doing it, but that's just let everybody know.
Thank you, Mr. Hoey. All right. Okay, so we've gotten through the agenda, so at this point, we'll take a pause until we fire up the meeting. So just please turn your mics off.
don't know. I'm like in a fog. I'm in a fog. I don't... It is now 7 o'clock. We'll call to order the Albany Common Council meeting Monday, October 21st, 2024. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Adams.
Present.
Anani. Ballerin.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Farrow.
Here.
Flynn.
Here.
Frederick.
Here.
Hoey.
Here.
Johnson.
Present.
Keegan. Kimbrough. Love.
Here.
Robinson.
Here.
Romero. Zamer.
Here.
14 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Will you please stand, rise with me, and say the Pledge of Allegiance, and after that, a moment of silence. Okay, right now we are, for item on the agenda, we have 2 public hearings tonight. Can the clerk please read the first notice of the public hearing?
Notice is hereby given that the Common Council public hearing will be held on October 21st, 2024 at 7 p.m. and will be held in advance of the potential passage of the following ordinance. This meeting will be an in-person meeting in the Common Council chambers, City Hall, and will be held on the following matters. Ordinance 28-21-24. An ordinance adopting the City of Albany's budget for fiscal year 2025 as presented by the mayor on October 1st, 2024. Documents will be inspected between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, in the office of the Common Council, 24 Eagle Street, room 206, Albany, New York, 12207. Efforts will be made to make documents available for viewing online. This public hearing will be held pursuant to guidelines established in the Open Meetings Law, and anyone wishing to be heard can submit written comments to commoncouncil@albanyny.gov or provide in-person testimony on the ordinance before the Common Council for consideration. The public hearing will be live streamed on our YouTube page. We encourage all interested parties to submit written comments by 12 noon, October 21st, 2024. Anyone wishing to be heard will have an opportunity to do so at the above stated time and location.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have anyone signed up?
We have 2 signed up.
Unlike this is not public comment, this is public hearing. Unlike public comment, during the public hearing process, you'll have 5 minutes to speak on the ordinance that is in front of you about this year's budget. After you speak, if council members wish to ask you a question, they can. Unlike public comment, they cannot. So if you're here, signed up for public hearing, council members, if they choose, they can ask you a question on your comments that you stated. So with that being said, can the clerk please call the first speaker?
Keith Irish.
And this is on the budget. And we do have another public hearing notice that will be after this one. Can you state your name and address for the record? And to start, you'll see the green light. The yellow light means you have 1 minute left to conclude your comments, and the red light means to conclude your comments.
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, elected members of the City Common Council that are present, residents of Albany present, and other concerned citizens. My name is Keith Irish, a current 9th Ward and lifelong city resident. I'm here to speak about Resolution 28-21-24 the adoption of the 2025 proposed city budget.
Mr. Irish, I will have to stop you there. That is going to be the next public hearing. So you will be called up for that. It's different. This public hearing is only on the budget, on
Yeah.
the proposed city budget. You said you're speaking upon the resolution. That's why I stopped you. The
Oh, I'm
resolution will
sorry.
be the second public hearing, so we can call
Wrong
you
word.
up after that.
I used the wrong word. Can I correct it?
Go right ahead, sir.
Thank you. I've been busy.
No problem. All right. Mr. Irish, I mean,
Yeah.
we don't have too many people signed up, so if you want to wait, I mean, it's fine.
No,
So you don't have to change your wording just to
That's all right.
satisfy the
I
resolution.
know, I just saying resolution to ordinance,
Okay,
because otherwise it's the right one for the budget hearing.
okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm here to speak about ordinance 2124, the adoption of the 2025 proposed city budget. Wow, where do I start? With the proposed $10,000 to $15,000 raises for all department heads, agency commissioners, and their number twos, the next to no raises or near nothing for lower-level actual workers, the moving around of positions to try to hide employees that should have been let go but retained under a different line item or different department for now, the new cutback restrictions on employees that are about the residents they serve, the continued cutback of some departments' leeway on how they interact with the public, the people that pay their salaries with bloated taxes, additional limitations and regulations, making it just outright tough for residents to take advantage of the city services. No, I think I will concentrate on the continued lack of adequate funding for Albany's community media cable access channels and the lack of support from this body. The corner office downstairs acting like it does not exist and not being able to promote to the residents what they are actually paying for through the franchise fee on their cable television monthly bill. In the budget book on page 15, line item 2770.01, PEG access funds, and page 22, section 40, line 7437, PEG contracted services, the amount indicated for the second year now is a paltry $50,000. The city is receiving an estimated $1 million annually from its residents, yet only indicate $50,000 for operational needs, which is basically staffing. While the current studio coordinator is only working approximately 26 hours a week because this person has approximately 5 other much more important to them priorities, there has been no effort to hire additional staffing for more hours open in the restricted public promotion needs. You are frankly missing the boat by not providing additional funding, but you are not utilizing what Albany's community media channels access can offer to you. Don't you watch the federal government C-SPAN channels? Don't you watch the New York State Legislative channel? Oh, that's right. A few of you do not even have cable television services. Well, there's ways around that too. But you owe it to yourself and the residents that elected you to be Spectrum cable television subscribers because you would be supporting the funding and operational needs of community media. In the meantime, you can alter the budgeted line items for additional funding and staffing as well as promotional material. There is also a pending franchise agreement with Spectrum that you should be reviewing as the last one. Most of you were not even in office when that one was written back in 2011. Thank you for your time and interest in the budget matter. I would also like to point out that in the public hearing notice that was issued over here for the public to pick up, the last line says comments are supposed to be submitted by 12 noon of July 1st, 2024. I would think you have meant that to be today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for council members? Thank you so much. Can the clerk call the next speaker?
Tom Ellis.
Tom Ellis, I live on North Pine Ave in the city of Albany.
I wanted to talk about the painting the crosswalks in Albany. I spoke about this, I think, in May last year, and I mentioned it 2 weeks ago. Again, I congratulate the city for pushing to lower the speed limit in Albany to 25 miles an hour. That's a huge improvement. And I noticed that some speed humps are being installed. I noticed a few on State Street today along Washington Park. Those things are good. But I saw that in the budget, the roadway taping line is blank. There is no number there. And I think that we need to do a better job, even though there's been an improvement in painting the crosswalks, certainly like on Western Avenue and Manning and Washington and Manning, there's been some improvements, but we still have a lot of intersections in Albany where we have no crosswalks at all, or we have ghost crosswalks where you can see a little faint crosswalk that might have been painted 15 years ago or 10 years ago. So I'd like to see $1 million in the budget to paint the crosswalks and to paint the bicycle lanes in Albany, because I think doing so would improve public safety a lot, especially for children, little kids on their way to school, older people trying to cross the street, and it takes them a long time to cross the street sometimes, people who have disabilities and other abilities, people in wheelchairs. I think we'd probably have fewer collisions, and I think we'd have fewer near collisions. And the near collisions don't get tabulated at all because they're not reported. But I think that we would have a much safer city if we were to spend more money keeping the crosswalks in the city painted so that people can actually see them, both pedestrians, wheelchairs, chairs, and people driving motorized vehicles. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We have no other person signed up tonight for budget hearing, so we'll now move on to our second public hearing notice. Madam Clerk, please read the public hearing notice.
Notice is hereby given that the Common Council public hearing will be held on October 21st, 2024 at 7 p.m. and will be held in advance of the potential passage of the following ordinances. This meeting will be an in-person meeting in the I'm going to start all over, I apologize. For the approval of cable television agreement between Spectrum Northeast LLC and the City of Albany as presented by Resolution 102-92-24, a resolution of the Common Council authorizing the execution of franchise agreement with Spectrum Northeast LLC. Please take notice that the City of Albany will hold a public hearing on October 21st, 2024 at 7 p.m. in the Common Council Chambers and City Hall at 24 Eagle Street, Albany, New York, regarding renewal of the cable television franchise agreement by and between the City of Albany and Spectrum Northeast LLC, an indirect subsidiary to Charter Communication. A copy of the agreement is available for the public inspection during normal business hours at the clerk's office at room 24 Eagle Street, room 202, Albany, New York. At such public hearing, all persons will be given the opportunity to be heard. Written and oral statements will be taken at that time. Time limitations may be imposed by each oral statement if necessary. Yes, we have two signed up. Keith Irish.
I have the right one this time. Good evening, elected members of the Common Council present and concerned residents of Albany. As you know, my name is Keith Irish, a current 9th Ward resident and a lifelong city citizen. I'm here to speak on tonight's public hearing on Resolution 102-92-24, the adoption of the new proposed cable franchise agreement with Spectrum Charter. This is something that happens approximately every 10 years when the last one was adopted under the Jennings administration, long before most of you were elected to your current position. Technology has changed dramatically since then, and this franchise agreement hopes to bring the city up to speed with what was not included in the last or current one and what's on the horizon for the next 10 years. This is a monumental task that supposedly the residents of Albany were to be involved with, but until now, I am not aware of any major outreach by the city to do this in this hearing. I hope, what did I write? Sorry. I hope this is only the first of several being offered to the residents to speak at. I want you to be aware that I personally was approached by the Corporation Counsel attorney that was in charge of those talks, knowing that I was very aware of what was missing and should be included. I have been advised that everything I suggested has been included and agreed to by Spectrum. I hope to recommend more items, but it takes time to guess what will come in the future. Unfortunately, many residents have done what is called cutting the cord and dropping the television service provided by Spectrum. I've even considered it, but realized that that would be restricting even more my free speech rights. It's bad enough that many city government public meetings have cut back on the amount of time the public is allowed to speak, including this body at times. But the public utilizing the community media access channels that this franchise agreement provides for by federal regulations does extend that right by the proposed 2025 city budget, once again limiting the amount of funding for the proposal operational needs of these channels. There also needs to be updates to the PEG Access Oversight Board, but that is not something the agreement can fix. This is something you need to do. It's oversized and loaded with non-caring and non-informed appointees and voting stakeholders. You and the residents of Albany need to read through the agreement, and anything you don't understand or think should be enhanced need to speak up so those concerns can be addressed. The new one is much more pro-city than the last pro-cable company one. But even the few of you that do not have cable television service, frankly, should be ashamed of yourselves, as you don't know the possibilities these channels can have, even for you, the elected by the public council members. I thank you for your time and look forward to including many more advanced options that can be agreed to.
Thank you. Mr. Hoey has a question for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Irish.
Yes, Mr. Hoey.
Well, you know I'm going to say, you're telling me I should be ashamed of myself because I chose not to buy something? I go out and I knock on doors. I go out and I put out literature. That's what I spent the weekend doing this weekend. I talk to the people in my ward, and I know what they want. And the other thing you brought up is free speech. How is it free when you have to pay for it? Can you explain that to me?
That is a generic good question, but it has to, it is allowed, it has to come from somewhere in order for the operational expenses to provide that service come from. And if it's not being allocated for that service and just going to the general fund, then it's not going where it should be for that purpose. And the services that are provided at the studio, between the use of it, the hardware equipment that's there, and things of that nature, is all free to the city residents that are paying this fee. So they should be able to use it and access it because they are paying for it. But if they're not informed about it, they're not educated about it, and they're not told that they could use it, then they do not know what they're paying for, and they think it's just another item on their bill. So the suggestion only for someone such as yourself is that there are other ways of doing it, but right now it can't be done because of the way the system is set up within Albany for the distribution of channels. Because all this stuff now is utilizing also a lot of the streaming services that are available. Now, by the streaming services right now, you would not be paying that franchise fee. But there has been attempts to make that a fee per se, because what comes through on the cable bill that you receive, and I'm assuming your streaming services come through Spectrum Internet, I'm assuming? yes, no, whichever, that the fee disappears from your bill if you're not having television services, but it's not there when you have internet or phone service. So there's attempts being made to try to make that a cable fee, not a television fee, so that anybody that has just the internet, they would be able to access those services because they are being paid for. The wire is still coming into your house, whether you use TV, internet, phone, the wire is still there. So why does it go away? So there are organizations that are trying to change that so that you would be equitably, covered by all the streaming services. Now, that's something that the city can't really do, I don't believe, but that's something that's more on the state level or the federal level. And that's where the efforts are being made to do that.
Well, I appreciate the explanation. My basic point is nothing, I can talk to you, this is free. Once we bring technology in, a newspaper, even a book or literature, it's no longer free. So I think we all think that, let's stand up for free speech. But free speech isn't free, is what I'm trying to say. But,
well,
you have nothing
that's
to
a
do
general,
with that.
that's a general across the
Got it.
board.
Yep. Thank you so much.
That's across the board thing.
Mr. Albany?
Thank you, Mr. President. As you already know, but I just want to make sure the public is aware, this is going to the Planning Committee on Monday. So if anyone has any more input that they'd like to share with the council, next week, the 28th, the Planning Committee will be hearing the franchise agreement to discuss and move forward. So if anyone has any, this is, a good public hearing. I appreciate you coming and speaking, but I do want to let the public know that there's other opportunities if people want to come and speak on this next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Adams?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just wanted to make a point of clarification or mention for people who are here today or listening that may not be familiar with the Channel Albany and the services that they do provide, that residents, as to Mr. Irish Point, are able to take advantage of whenever they would like. So we have several groups here, housing advocates, people who are here for fluoridation this evening, Channel Albany is an outlet for these groups, these organizations, to be able to speak to the public and provide direct information and education to residents in the city of Albany. And to Mr. Irish's point, it's very imperative that we as a council start to focus in on this issue a lot more seriously to make sure that we're able to not only improve the services that we're providing to our residents, but that we're also staying above the curve in terms of the streaming opportunities and different ways that people will be able to access this moving forward. So as a person who has been to the studio several times to do several stories or cover things that we've addressed here in the council, I encourage other organizations and groups to go and do the same because, again, the more we use it, the more it's being utilized, the more beneficial people will see its purpose is. So just wanted to highlight that to let people know that this is something that residents here in the city can take advantage of, can utilize right now, and for people who do have cable, they do watch it. So there is an audience that watches this, that uses it, and this is why we need to continue to try to support this and fight for this in our budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Barrelman, for reminding the public, and I thank you, Mr. Adams, for your vocal support.
Danny Boudreau.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Danny Boudreau. I live in the 6th Ward. I came here tonight to support United Tenants of Albany. I've been a nurse in the community for several years now. I worked at Albany Med.
Excuse me. This is only pertaining to the public hearing. It is pertaining to the resolution around public access contract, the cable contract. So if you want to speak about what you want, you can do that during public comment period.
Oh, I think that's what I intended to sign up for.
Oh, public comment period? Okay.
Yeah,
So
I
we'll
apologize.
yes, you'll be on that.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. No problem. We have no one else signed up for a public hearing tonight, so the public hearing will be closed. Now we'll move on to public comment. Hold on.
Come back.
During public comment period, let me state, you come up, state your name and address for the record. You will have 4 minutes to speak upon any topic you wish to speak upon. We've limited the amount of time because so many people have signed up and it will go over our time, so we want to make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. So we've limited it to 4 minutes this evening. At this time, council members cannot ask you questions. They cannot answer your comments. If they choose to do so, they will do so at a later time during the agenda. So with that being said, can the clerk please call the first speaker?
Hello.
Danny Boudreau.
Thank you. I got to get my exercise, and I figured out how to use the doors, so that's great. My name is Danny Boudreau. I'm here to support United Tenants of Albany tonight for the rally. I've been a nurse in the community for several years. I worked at Albany Med in the ER and in St. Peter's ER. And I know everyone here is very supportive and passionate about housing. I wanted to talk a little bit about the healthcare ramifications of the housing crisis. I know a lot of people are probably aware that a lot of patients and people in our community sacrifice basic healthcare needs and sacrifice taking their medications. I also wanted to talk about all of my patients that come in that suffer heart attacks, cardiac arrests. I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this, but there's an increase in 30 to 40% of cardiac arrests and heart attacks in the winter compared to the warmer months, being summer. So the cold constricts your blood vessels, increasing the strain on the heart, increasing blood pressure, increases coagulability, so blood clots, which lead to heart attacks and strokes. A lot of the members in the community will sacrifice not just like food and their medications, but they'll lower their thermostats to save money. Even a temperature of 67 degrees or below can result in hypothermia, especially for the elderly, and lead to cardiac arrests, heart attacks. So it's really heartbreaking to me to see patients coming in repeatedly in the readmissions, because you do everything you can when they come in to stabilize them, get them back on their medications. Sometimes they even require an ICU stay, which costs several $1,000s and jeopardizes their health. And a part of being a nurse is discharge planning. And the heartbreaking thing is like, I know when they go back out to the community, the same problem is going to happen. They're not going to take their meds. They might be in unstable housing, cold housing, unsafe housing, and risk becoming homeless. And I know that this might be like uncomfortable to hear, but I've had a lot of homeless patients coming in repeatedly with hypothermia that are literally losing limbs. You might have even seen some of them in wheelchairs around Lark Street. And they essentially get turned away. Some of them have behavioral issues. They get turned away back out into the cold again. And within days, they're already back, maybe requiring an additional surgery. And I just feel like if we demand more money, specifically $125,000 for rent control, we can prevent more people from becoming homeless, allow people to have more wiggle room, especially being on a fixed income, to afford their rent and basic necessities. And that would prevent them from becoming more sick and risking their health. And I believe that housing is a human right. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the clerk call next speaker?
Nancy Carey.
Just a reminder, when you see the light goes yellow, that means you have 1 minute remaining, and red means conclude your comments. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Carey. My address is 20 Corporate Woods Boulevard, Albany. I'm here this evening representing 44 Holland Avenue LLC, which are the long-term owners of the 6 parcels located on the south side of Holland Avenue, and which is the subject of a potential overreaching designation, the creation of the Holland Historic District that is unfairly penalizes a sole owner and which is in conflict with the city's own designation and vision for the Holland Avenue corridor. Due to time constraints associated with tonight, my comments are going to offer 4 clear and compelling points for your consideration. I would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you more substantially prior to any further action by this council. First, the structures are of marginal historic value, if any. The appearance of the Tudor-style structures may stand out against the existing heavily developed commercial, medical, office, Holland Avenue corridor. We get that. They're not particularly old by Albany standards. They're not associated with a particularly important person or event in Albany's history. And most importantly, their aesthetic value is significantly diminished by their poor condition. They attract the homeless and vandals, not tourists. There are literally thousands of houses in the same vintage located in Pine Hills, Buckingham Pond, Whitehall Road, Eagle Crest, Melrose, and North Albany neighborhoods, to name a few. As representatives of city residents, perhaps they are not touched by this designation. It opens the door to this sort of unconstitutional taking on every street in the city. Second, the potential creation of a new district does not carry the owner's support or endorsement. Historic districting works when you have a motivated owner looking for municipal support for assistance with preservation efforts. That's not the case here. The owner has determined that it is simply not economically feasible to invest the significant amount of money that would be necessary to repurpose the structures for any currently permitted use in the USDO. Historic districting here is not being requested by the owner, it's being imposed on the owner. Are you prepared as members of the Common Council to expose your constituents to a yet unwritten regulation that effectively takes their privately owned property without consent and is wrapped in a rationale absence of accuracy reflects the objectives of several dozen activists that believe their perspective is the only reasonable one? Third, this will not advance the city's long-term historic preservation interests. If accepted, the HRC's recommendation to create an historic district for these structures will achieve Historic Albany's intended immediate short-term goal, preventing the owner from undertaking any demolition or exterior alterations. Without a plan, creating an historic district will simply preserve the unacceptable current status quo. The owner will be prevented from redeveloping the property to a use more compatible with the Holland Avenue corridor. Well, as each year goes by, the condition of the structures will continue to further deteriorate. Preserving this status quo advances the interest of neither the owner nor the city. We ask that you reject this recommendation and reconsider it for further discussion. I know you can't ask questions, but I'm available to meet with council members or a committee of the council, and certainly with the council member from the 7th Ward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Can the clerk please call?
Christian Kilb. Christina Kilb, excuse me.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for letting us speak tonight. My name's Christine Kiel. I live in Menands, Dutch Village, and I have a particular interest in environmental health, and that's why I'm here tonight, in particular to talk about the water fluoridation issue. You should have each gotten a handout, about 5 or 6 pages, containing graphs, and there's a one-pager at the end. And so I'm just going to go over these. So I'm retired from the New York State Health Department. I worked as an epidemiologist for about 18 years on environmental health issues, including asthma among school children, pesticide exposure, and congenital heart defects. And I also helped analyze health data related to the Love Canal exposures. At a recent meeting 2 weeks ago, some of us spoke about federal court findings based on epidemiologic data from the National Toxicology Program that showed that there is a risk associated with community water fluoridation for reduced IQ in young children and children exposed in utero through maternal exposure. At tonight's meeting, I'd like to present evidence that shows the ineffectiveness of fluoridation as it relates to cavities among children. This evidence comes from New York State New York State data, as well as data from the WHO, World Health Organization, and the Cochrane Group, which I will describe in a bit. The first graph is titled New York State Fluoridation and Tooth Decay. And what it's showing here is that this is by county, New York State counties. The counties are along the bottom of the graph, and the red line going across is showing the percent of third graders with one or more cavities. And this goes from across counties. So this is a geographic analysis. And you see the counties are on the bottom there, and Albany County is kind of right in the middle. The counties are ordered from little or no fluoridation to, more fluoridation, because different municipalities have different rules. So as you see, the percent of fluoridation in the county increases. You don't see a decrease in the percent of third graders with one or more cavities. There's really essentially no relationship there. And going to the next 2 graphs, these graphs came from studies done by the Cochrane collaboration. And these look at number of fewer cavities with fluoridation over time. And I'll say a little bit about the Cochrane collaboration. It's a nonprofit organization of 30,000 expert researchers and health professionals from around the world, and they have they're considered to be the gold standard in evaluating the effectiveness of health interventions. The first graph looks at the effectiveness in relation to baby teeth in children under 5 years, and shows the number of fewer cavities over time. And I know that sounds a little convoluted, but it found that the community fluoridation was initially associated with about a 3.5 tooth advantage relative to non-fluoridated communities. This is just fluoridated communities compared to the non-fluoridated. It shows, a fair reduction in the beginning in 1970 and 1975, and then you see that the line goes way down. So now we're at 2020, 2025. There's not much of a improvement relating to the number of cavities over
Ms.
time.
Gill, your time is up. Thank you so much. Thank you. Can the clerk call the next speaker?
Keith Irish.
Good evening, council members. As you know, my name is Keith Irish, in the city of Albany resident all my life. I didn't get a chance to write prepared notes for what I'm going to talk about on this one, so you'll be shocked. I wanted to talk about resolutions 117, 102, 24R, about the Common Council declaring yesterday as Community Media Day, and resolution 118, 102, 24, declaring this week, starting today, as Free Speech Week in the city of Albany. Those are obviously very important things to the public. Community Media Day is a day to make people aware of what the community channels can do, should do, and would be able to do. I only found out last Wednesday at the most recent PEG Access Oversight Board that they were planning a Community Day activity. But it was this afternoon between 1 and 3, and I saw no promotion of it, and I didn't even attend it because of the lack of promotion to know about it. So that's something that the city should also be supporting more than just with the resolution, but I appreciate Councilmember Anani and Councilmember Kimbrough for supporting the resolutions, and I hope everybody else is co-sponsors, and it will be passed unanimously. As far as the resolution for Free Speech Week, that is a variation on what Mr. Councilmember Hoey was bringing up about free speech. And as the phrase goes, free speech is not free, so that applies several ways across the board. And that would be something that the council members would be also supporting, obviously, and I hope they all are behind it and pass it again this year. But passing a resolution is nice and well appreciated, but without the support behind it of these two, as well as the one that was passed 2 weeks ago, it doesn't have much teeth to the public, because that's part of the promotional information that free speech incurs, or Community Media Day informing people on a more generic basis what those 3 channels are available for them to either use or to be able to watch meetings such as this. But right now, they're not doing a very good job at it, because a lot of the control is being done by Schenectady, which makes absolutely no sense, and we're in the 6th year of doing that. So I just wanted to bring that up, and I thank the sponsors for the resolutions this year again, as well as hopefully your unanimous support in these resolutions. But remember, just doing a piece of paper with signatures on it does not do everything that should be done regarding these resolutions. So that's all encompassed in everything else. So I thank you. I just wanted to, like I said, make it be aware of that before you pass them later this evening. I presume passing them later this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clerk, call next speaker.
Patricia Pierce.
Good evening. My name is Patricia Pierce. I live on Grove Avenue in Albany, and am a spokesperson for the community group Safe Water Albany that is leading the opposition to water fluoridation. Safe Water Albany just produced the frequently asked questions sheet on the recent federal lawsuit decision that ruled fluoridation, quote, poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children. We wrote this document in connection with Michael Connett, the lead attorney for the successful plaintiffs in this lawsuit. All of you received this by email yesterday, and it should answer many questions you may have. I want to address one aspect of this ruling, the extent to which fluoridation can reduce IQ points in unborn children and infants. For mothers drinking an average amount of water, the expected IQ loss for their children is in the range of 1 to 3 IQ points. However, for mothers drinking substantially more, which is about 5% of the population, the estimated loss is in the range of 5 to 7 IQ points. Since there is a wide range of susceptibility between individuals to any toxic chemical, some children will suffer no loss of IQ at all, some will have the average, and some will have more. I want to note that the court ruling said that just one IQ point loss has been shown to be associated with reduced educational attainment, employment status, productivity, and earned wages. Putting fluoride in the water is putting every child born in Albany at risk of having a diminished quality of life. I want to relate fluoride with another toxin that you're all familiar with, lead. As I think you know, there is a consensus that there is no safe level of lead. It's a known neurotoxin. It causes loss of IQ. I want to read the statements of some of the highest level scientists and physicians in neurotoxicity in the world, commenting on one study from Canada that both sides in the lawsuit agreed was particularly strong. Dr. Christine Till, PhD of York University in Toronto, and also co-author of the study, said 4.5 points is a dramatic loss of IQ, comparable to what you would see with lead exposure. Dr. David Bellender, PhD professor at the Harvard School of Public Health and current president of the International Society for Children's Health and the Environment, said, it's actually very similar to the effect size that's seen with childhood exposure to lead. Dr. Dimitri Christakis, MD, Seattle pediatrician, and editor of the Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics on fluoridated water's harm in the study, said, an effect size which is sizable, on par with the lead. Dr. Christakis was also quoted in the Washington Post saying, I would not have my wife drink fluoridated water if she were pregnant. No one on this council would recommend that we add lead to the water. Why would you recommend adding fluoride to the water when it has the same harmful effects? Please, for the sake of our children, please act now to put an end to this movement toward fluoridation. It's the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the clerk please call the next speaker?
Alexa Bontempo.
My name's Alexa Bontempo. I live on Grove Avenue in Albany. As you know, the judge ruled on the lawsuit against the federal EPA regarding fluoridation. The court stated that the plaintiffs proved by a preponderance of the evidence that water fluoridation at 0.7 milligrams per liter, the prescribed optimal level in the United States, poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children, a risk sufficient to require the EPA to write a regulatory response. Isn't it wise, then, to do the prudent thing at this point and at least delay this implementation, as was proposed by Tom Hoey, if this was the court's finding? We don't know what these EPA guidelines will be, and moving ahead at this time may result in a further waste of time, resources, and cause harm to members of the community. Someone mentioned a couple weeks ago something about re-rendering science. Are we re-rendering science now? Yes. We make policy based on new science all of the time. We did it for lead, asbestos, tobacco, opioids. Science changes as more is researched and evaluated. And in this case, over many years of research, it was found that 64 of 72 studies show fluoride has a negative effect on IQ. I want to thank Chris, who just spoke. She's another epidemiologist. She also spoke 2 weeks ago, and she pointed out the importance of reproducibility in research. This has certainly occurred in this case with 64 of 72 studies. If you go forward, how will you ensure residents will know that there's fluoride in the water? And I don't want to hear it'll be in the news, because I've heard that before, and the news has been biased and less than forthcoming on this issue. You really need to ensure the public knows. What will you communicate to pregnant women? I think it's imperative they know the risks. My neighbor gives his 2 kids that are under 4 fluoride drops. I told him he might want to stop that when Albany starts fluoridating the water. He had no idea this was going on. So his kids would be getting double the dose of fluoride if I didn't mention it to him. So do the right thing. Do the thing that the vast majority of your constituents want. Don't add fluoride to our water now, and I hope not ever. For those that think very much about their legacy, we heard that mentioned a lot this past winter. Do you want your legacy to be lowered IQs in Albany's children and that you don't listen to your constituents? Please begin to acknowledge the science and recognize the wants of your constituents. I'm glad I'm on the right side of science, and I feel really good about being here to represent the vast majority of Albany residents who are also opposed to water fluoridation. I did state in my email to Mr. Hoey a quote by Ben Franklin, who said, "For having lived long, I've experienced many instances of being obliged by better information or fuller consideration to change opinions, even on important subjects which I once thought right but found to be otherwise." It's okay to reverse course on this. You'd be well respected for doing so. And kudos to my council member, Sergio Adams, and to Joyce Love for their stance. It's not easy to go against the majority. I understand that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can the clerk please call the next speaker?
Jake Del Ingle.
I volunteer with Citizen Action of New York. Please fluoridate. Please fluoridate the water. I'm here to speak on Invest in Our New York. Citizen Action has been working on this. If you don't know the broad strokes, you will. I have been stretched kind of thin. I've been working on other things. We had the Perry Awards. It was a lot of fun. Hope you were there. But I'm the only one here, so I get to speak on it. I'm going to riff a little. I wrote some thoughts. I've had to think more than I want to in my life about standard of living versus quality of life and the neoliberal principles. I'm a child of the 90s and the role of business and government. Thank you for having me. There was a time not so long ago, and even now, in some halls and boardrooms, the myth persists that by encouraging the highest possible standard of living, you would be promoting the highest possible quality of life for anyone willing to put in the work to achieve the dream and the right of each New Yorker to a safe, prosperous, dignified life in our state. But what we have gained instead is a truly childish and, frankly, embarrassing hoarding of resources by the moneyed few to the detriment of the hardworking, long-suffering majority of New Yorkers. So the work that you would undertake in supporting Invest in Our New York will be difficult. It will be in many ways thankless. There isn't a lot of glory. There isn't a lot of money in fighting for the working class. There will be those that oppose you, and they will be well-spoken, and they will be well-funded. But it's necessary work. It's necessary if we're going to build a future for this state that isn't desperately bleak, and a state that, frankly, doesn't suck. We'll do this work together. We'll do the work together because it's necessary. Support us. We will support you. We will support each other. Invest in our New York. Thank you.
Clerk, please call the next speaker.
Rick North.
Hello, my name is Rick North, and I'm from Wellesley, Massachusetts. My background is in nonprofit health management, and I worked 21 years for the American Cancer Society, the last 5 as CEO of the Oregon chapter. I have many family and friends in Albany, and I'm a member of Safe Water Albany. I was interviewed on WAMC last week, and I want to thank Dave Lucas for covering the story of the federal court ruling against the EPA and fluoridation. I thought he did a nice job, although I wanted to correct a number of statements tonight for the record. First, he said, I claimed fluoride is a neurotoxin, a substance causing brain damage. There has been a consensus it's a neurotoxin since at least 2006, and both the plaintiffs and EPA acknowledged it in the lawsuit. It's not just me. Second, the State Dental Association said, in spite of the court's ruling, that it still supports fluoridation. They said that decisions, quote, should not be made in haste and just based on the ruling of one judge. In haste, one judge? The lawsuit took 7 years and included testimony from numerous scientists in neurotoxicity, epidemiology, and risk assessment. The judge then wrote an 80-page decision based totally on scientific experts. There was nothing in haste about it. Third, Water Commissioner Joe Coffey said the commission is proceeding with fluoridation with due diligence. Was there due diligence when the National Toxicology Program report came out August 21st, concluding that higher fluoride concentrations were, quote, consistently associated with lower IQ in children, citing several studies that levels in fluoridated water? Was there due diligence when on September 24th, the court ruled that fluoridation, quote, poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children? Were there any attempts at contacting these experts, scientists, and physicians finding fluoridation's risks? Were there any meetings with the public? There were none. And finally, Council Member Hoey said, quote, in this WAMC piece, quote, even the judge himself said this, referring to the ruling, should not interfere with anybody's fluoridation right now, unquote. This is the entire 80-page report. I read all of it. The judge said nothing about any city's decision on whether to fluoridate or not. Months ago, Mr. Hoey also publicly stated that if this court ruling, quote, finds that fluoride is not good for the water, of course, myself and the rest of council will withdraw the legislation to put fluoride in the water. This is exactly what the court ruled. So, is Mr. Hoey going to keep his promise to the people of Albany to withdraw fluoridation or not? I don't know. He hasn't said yet. But it's not just about him. It's about the whole council. In your defense, when you voted to fluoridate, none of you knew the NTP would report that 18 out of the 19 highest quality studies linked higher fluoride with lower IQs, several of them at levels in fluoridated water. And you didn't know the federal court would rule that fluoridation poses an unreasonable risk of reduced IQs in children. But now you know, including information about fluoridation's ineffectiveness, and you've been informed by Safe Water Albany on all of them. It's on your website that it's your duty to protect the quality of life of Albany's residents. How can you protect Albany's residents when you allow a practice known to pose an unreasonable risk of reduced IQ in children, equivalent, according to many experts, to lead? If you do the right thing and end fluoridation,
thank you, sir. Your time
the
is up.
people of Albany will be forever grateful to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kimbrough, we've reached our 30-minute mark. We have a few more people.
Thank you. Motion to extend public comment 30 minutes.
Is there a second? Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Time extended. Can the clerk please call the next speaker?
Tom Ellis.
Tom Ellis. I live in Albany, as I said a few minutes ago. After we spoke 2 weeks ago, one of the councilwomen said that, and I think correctly, that the court decision is not legally binding on this council. Okay, I think that's correct. But it is going to be legally binding on the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and they have regulatory oversight over the entire United States, including the city of Albany. But to me, the more important issue is this decision going to, are you going to look at the moral aspect of it? The judge ruled, or the judge just determined that if you put fluoride in the water at the amount that what would come in the water in Albany, that if pregnant women drink it, they're going to be more likely to have children with reduced IQs. I'm confident that you're going to understand that and that you will make the decision, and Mr. Hoey will do it, to not put fluoride in the city of Albany. I'm confident that you'll do it. We asked you a year ago to keep an open mind, and I'm confident that you will. I think what we really need to do, though, and it's an issue way bigger than the city of Albany, we need to find some safe way to reduce the rates of cavities in children, okay? And that would require a huge effort nationally. You know, one is we need to have more dental clinics in schools and even in daycare centers where dentists could travel to these places and look at little kids and see early on when they're 2, 3, 4 years old or in primary grades whether they have cavities. That's going to cost money, okay? At the national level, we need higher Medicaid reimbursement rates for dentists. That way we could have a lot more dentists willing to accept Medicaid. Maybe we should double the rate even, you know? And that way more dentists would be willing to look at poor kids, okay? And we also need to establish a profession called a dental therapist. That would be between a dental hygienist and a dentist. There's a few states who allow this, and there's a few Indian reservations in the United States that allow it. And if we had it here in New York, then some of the women or men, probably mostly women who are dental hygienists, would become dental therapists, and then they could treat tooth decay and cavities in children and in adults. And we would basically increase the number of professionals who could do this kind of work, okay? But the biggest challenge of all, I think, is that we as a nation need to take on the processed food industry, which puts tremendous amounts of sugar in food and then encourages people to eat massive amounts of it. You know, that's a huge battle. It can't be done locally only. It needs to be done nationally. Finally, I have a handout here. This is from Clean Water Hillsborough. Hillsborough is a municipality in Oregon, and they're fighting a fluoridation campaign right now. I'm going to give this to you to be included in the record. And they have a couple of quotes here. One from Erin Brockovich, the consumer advocate and filmmaker. She said less than a month ago on Facebook, any drinking water utility that continues to feed this poison into the community water system does so with full knowledge they are causing harm, end quote. And one other one I'll read to you here. This is from Dr. Hardy Limbach, PhD, DDS, former president of the Canadian Association of Dental Research, quote, this is a month ago, quote, the evidence that fluoridation is more harmful than beneficial is now overwhelming, end quote. So I'm going to give you this. Please include it in the official record of tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellis. Thank you. Can the clerk call the next speaker?
Sherry Long.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of United Tenants. I live over on North Lake Avenue near Washington Park. And I'm worried about rent going up and not being stabilized here in Albany. I moved into the site where I live, and landlord talked each of us that rent there into signing a contract, but he varies on the rent for our unit. There's myself and 2 other ladies in one section of the building, and then there's other tenants upstairs in the building. And we've asked him to address issues with our property, such as rodents, and it doesn't matter how clean we keep it, doesn't matter how much we spend on Lysol, Doesn't matter how much bleach we're using. You know, we take out trash every single night to try to keep our unit good and clean, but we're still having rats and roaches. And now, after we've moved in, he's like, oh, surprise, by the way, I must sell the building. We were given no notice. We just came home from the store one day, and there was a sign on the stairs. And we were just like, what? Like, hold up. Who's this person? Wait, did it just get sold? Do we have a new landlord? Like, what? We're worried about our rent going up even though we're in contracts. I work actually 2 jobs. I'm looking for a third so I can keep up with all my bills. The other folks I live with, most of them work. One is on disability. And our rents vary. Like, I pay one amount for the room I'm in, but then the other tenants pay vastly different amounts, and our room sizes are pretty much the same. And so our landlord just is like, okay, on a whim I want to charge this, and on a whim I want to charge that. When we moved in, he told us that it would be all utilities included. In the past 2 months, he has come to me and been like, oh, we want you to pay the cable. Can you put cable and internet in your name? And I don't feel comfortable doing that, but I feel pressured to do that from him. I felt pressured to put the damn electric and gas bill in my name because he wouldn't stop harping on it. Every time I turned around, he was texting and calling, you know, can we please put this in your name? And I'm just like, okay, fine, you wore me down. I'll do it. And I'm supposed to go to the other tenants and ask them and say, okay, y'all, electric's due. Here's my portion. Can you help me out with the rest so we can pay this? I don't own property. I don't own real estate. Quite frankly, I'm too daggone poor to do that. But it doesn't seem like that's something that should be allowed or fair. My lease comes up in January, and now I have to figure out how to put away money to try to find something else somewhat affordable here in Albany. So can you all do something to look at rent stabilization? Because so many of us are out here and we're literally terrified. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the clerk call next speaker?
Brianne Morrison.
Hi, Common Council. My name is Brianne Morrison. I live on Madison Avenue, and I'm coming here to you today in support of United Tenants as a tenant myself, and hoping that you will allocate the $125,000 to support the city into opting into rent control. So the city was supposed to have this study completed back in May, the vacancy study, and it's now the end of October, and we still don't have the study. So hoping that allocating that funds will help secure the city in doing maybe a restudy, which is something that might need to be done. Rent control is a key component to achieving housing equity, housing access, making sure that people are in their homes, because rents are going up, wages are not going up. This isn't news to any of you. I know these are things that you know, but still are worth being stated. 1 in 3 Albany tenants are rent burdened, with half of them paying more than half of their rent every month, or half of their paycheck every month to rent. So it's just something that we are hoping that you would consider. And affordable housing is scarce, and it is also something that is income-based. So rent stabilization can make any home an affordable home by making sure that landlords can't up the price of rent, and also that by increasing rent can cause people to be evicted, which would be more people out of their homes, which isn't good for anyone. So thank you so much for your time and your attention, and I hope that the Common Council will continue to support the tenants of Albany, which I've been told that you have in the past, so just encouraging you to continue to do that. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you.
Canyon Ryan.
Hello. We should get more chairs because we're really uncomfortable on the floor. EPA, what about ETPA? I do support fluoridation. Canyon Ryan, United Tenants of Albany. We are here requesting $125,000 allocation to support the city in its ongoing work to opt into ETPA, Emergency Tenant Protection Act. As you know, last November, this council appropriated $75,000 to conduct a vacancy study, which is a necessary step to opt into rent control. There was a lively discussion then about whether or not the study would be done in-house via the Department of Community and Neighborhood Services or externally through a consultant agency. And after much consideration, you all determined that it made the most sense to grant the funds to DCNS. The study was supposed to be conducted by May and produced in June. There have been delays with that process, ostensibly due to the city being the largest yet to conduct a study, which is totally reasonable, and we've made a real effort to give the city a lot of grace and brevity throughout that process. So our hope for this year's allocation is to support the city with a multitude of contingencies to be considered. So if the results are below 5%, which would be good and bad because it means there's a housing emergency, but it means that we could opt into rent control, the council could make that declaration. And it's almost undoubtable that in that case, we would be, the city would be sued. And every municipality has since opting into the vacancy survey, or opting into ETPA after the vacancy survey. And with much of the legal costs associated with such a challenge being supported through Corporation Council's budget, it still makes sense to us to allocate a fund specifically to support the study. For instance, testing may be necessary to assist the city in furthering its due diligence after that report is published. We may also need a consultant to reproduce a smaller survey that articulates similar or the same findings. So not a completely new study, but a review of what was produced and other mechanisms to support what has already been completed by the city. A cushion, if you will, since there may be more broader fiscal implications associated with a successful study, no matter its results. Michael McKee, who some of you may know from who did ETPA training a while back, he's probably knows more about the Emergency Tenant Protection Act than anybody in New York State. He's an adamant supporter of allocating funding to support an attorney specifically tasked with defending tenants whose rights are trampled on once a city opts into ETPA, as was the case in Kingston. $125,000 would certainly cover the insurance and salary costs of such an important legal defender of tenants' rights during that process. And really, this funding is just to support a successful study and the tenants that need it the most. Alternatively, a contingency cushion can be used if needed to reconduct a study on the off chance that the vacancy rate is above 5% and there are sound methodological concerns that are raised. There's always a risk that that could happen with this kind of project given the task's newness. Last year, when conversations were occurring about what entity should be tasked with producing Albany's vacancy study, we were concerned about the risks of allocating funding for an external study and then coming up with no bids, which is something that the city's history with the vacancy study has suggested could happen again. So UTA and some members that are here tonight met with the Collective for Community, Culture, and Environment then to float the number 100,000 and asked if that would be enough to conduct a study, and they said, maybe short of the total need, but it's possible. Nonetheless, it'd be doable. So CCCE is the same body that conducted the Poughkeepsie study and the Village of Austining study, the latter of which took place after HSTPA changed the law and allowed upstate municipalities to opt in, meaning that CCCE, they were able to defend their study after a legal challenge, so they have experience in a low experience field and a rubric which has overcome court challenges. So in any case, this allocation seems to make sense. It undeniably demonstrates a continued effort on forward motion to bring rent stabilization to the city, if applicable. It grants us coffers to defend such a study, and it is a contingent support if a study finds a vacancy rate below 5% and enables us to redo the study if necessary.
Time's up. Thank you. Can the clerk call the next speaker?
Emma Hollins.
Hello, Common Council. My name is Emma Hollins. I am a resident of the 6th Ward in Albany, and for about a year now, I have been the tenant advocate at the United Tenants of Albany. As a tenant advocate, my job involves meeting with hundreds of tenants, hearing their needs, their issues, and one of the biggest issues that I have seen in my job is that the rent is too high. We here in Albany, as a predominantly tenant city, need rent control. The fact of the matter is that landlords have been jacking up the prices of rent astronomically recently. In fact, between 2020 and 2023, rent has increased 26% on average, while the median income only increased by 11.6%. The math doesn't add up here. The fact of the matter is that we must have rent control. Now, Common Council, I do applaud you for passing good cause eviction, not only in 2021, but in 2024 as well. That is a giant boon for tenants, and trust me, doing this job, I know how beneficial that legislation was. So I beg, I plead that you do it again, helping tenants with rent stabilization and rent control. So we demand $225 to support the city opting into rent control, the funding to be used to continue forward motions on winning the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, supporting a successful study if the vacancy rate is below 5%, and doing another study, outsourced study, if the result is above 5%. Tenants cannot wait another year. In my 11 months working at this job, I have seen so much suffering, so many people coming into my office crying, bawling their eyes out because they simply cannot afford rent and they are facing evictions because, their car broke down so they can't make it to work, or their child gets sick. This is something where it's like, it's so obvious that we need rent control. We need it to protect tenants, to keep them in their homes, and to make sure that Albany stays a place where renters feel safe, they feel comfortable being here, and they don't have to face the stress and the terror of possibly being evicted because the landlord has jacked up the price of rent. So, yeah, that's all I wanted to say. I have a few more things on here. 1 in 3 tenants in Albany are rent burdened, with half of them paying more than 50% of their monthly income towards housing alone. In fact, when I was at this job at UTA, I have found that some people are paying nearly 80% of their income towards rent, which is absolutely ridiculous. How are you going to survive if you have to pay so much towards living in a house and having shelter and a roof? So with 13 seconds left, I have to say, please, 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 please fund this vacancy study so that we can get rent control in the city of Albany.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Clerk, next speaker.
Francis McGuy.
Hi, Common Council. Francis McGuy. I live in the 6th Ward, and I'm here to speak on including $125,000 in the 2025 budget. So, first off, I wanted to say I'm glad that we're in agreement that housing is a priority, right? It's one of the fundamental rights, so I'm not going to beat you guys over the head with that because I know that you understand that. I was going to speak on my experience in the city in terms of how people are facing housing insecurity. So I work with youth in the South End. I'm a supervisor for a youth employment program that we run, and I've noticed that housing insecure youth are very much less able to bring themselves to work well at work. We have the privilege as a job training program to be forgiving and patient with these behaviors that in many other jobs would result in suspension or firing. But most housing insecure folks don't have that. Many of our youth employees struggle with housing insecurity, as do many working families throughout the city of Albany, as I'm sure you're aware. For example, it took one of our hardest working youth employees the better part of a year for their family to find an affordable 3-bedroom, all the meanwhile bouncing between family and friends, couches, and shelters. This is just one example of the many, many working families that struggle to access quality, safe, and affordable housing, leading to many avoidable stresses, anxieties, and decreased quality of life. I know a family that couldn't buy medicine for their kids because they needed to store away money to make rent. So this is where you can help, right? ETPA would provide protections for 25% of renters in the city of Albany and allow the most vulnerable in our city to lead safer, healthier, and more fulfilling and productive lives. This would make the city better in so many ways. So to close, I'm going to say, as we move towards 2025, I urge you to do your utmost to protect and support your most vulnerable constituents. Thank you for your work, and please challenge yourselves to be the champions of everyone in Albany. I urge you to include $125,000 in the 2025 budget for defending the vacancy study. And as a closing remark, I also want to urge you to go forward with the plans to fluorinate the water. I work weekly in public schools in Albany, and I see many of the students and hear from many of their teachers about how their constant pains from cavities in their mouth allow them not really learn the way that they should be. So please, 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 let's get this vacancy study done properly, and please fluorinate the water. Thank you.
Thank you. Can the clerk call next speaker?
Michael Branstein.
Michael Bronstein. I live at 343 Watervliet Shaker Road. I'm here to say that we should do this tenant study, impose rent control. Too many people in our city are not able to make ends meet. People are suffering. And if we have the money, I don't see why this isn't being done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jacob Finland.
Hi, my name is Jacob Feinland. I live on Maple Ridge Ave in Albany. I'm here with the United Tenants of Albany to demand $125,000 to support the city opting into rent control. Rents increased 26% on average from 2020 to 2023, while median income increased only 11.6%. The longer the vacancy study takes, the longer it is before people have the security provided by rent control. I live in an apartment with my sister, who's in residency at Albany Med. Like many in our generation, she is entering the workforce with a mountain of student loan debt that she'll be paying off for a decade. If we face rent hikes It'll be even longer before she's debt-free. And as a doctor, she can expect to pay those off eventually. But how many people in this city face extreme levels of student debt without the same assurances of the income of being a doctor? So many jobs with a livable income require a degree, and the cost of that degree is burdening them for years. People need to know that they're going to have a place to stay that they can afford. They need to be able to build their futures knowing that they can afford just basic living expenses now, to take care of their bodies, to, you know, all of what preventative healthcare is, to make sure that we live long lives. We need to have the funds to take good care of our bodies now so that we don't have to end up paying exorbitant fees later in life from all the complications that we run into. From our doctors to the unhoused patients we heard about earlier, with their lives constantly endangered because of lack of shelter, we all have a right to life. And that means a right to have somewhere to live. So please devote $125,000 to support opting into rent control to protect people's right to life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherry Long. Sherry Long.
Okay. That's all who signed up tonight for the public comment period. Public comment period is deemed closed at this time. Moving on to approval of minutes from previous meetings. Mr. Kimbrough.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I offer the October 7th of 2024 meeting minutes for approval.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Minutes pass. Moving on to considerations of local laws. Ms. Fredericks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice Local Law K of 2024 and expert's introduction.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the local law?
A local law overriding the tax levy limit law for fiscal year 2025.
Thank you. Mr. Kimbrough.
Thank you, Mr. President. Be a referral to the Council's Finance Committee.
All right. Reports of standing committees or ad hoc committees. Mr. Hoey.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Public Safety Committee will be meeting tomorrow at 5:30 in the council chambers. We plan to have Chief Hawkins come in and talk about the dog attack that happened about 10 days ago and, discuss, what we can do to prevent this from happening again. And I hope everybody can make it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Committee met on Tuesday, October 8th to discuss the fire and APD budgets for fiscal year 2025. We met on Thursday, October 10th to discuss the recreation and youth and workforce budgets. And we also met on Tuesday, October 15th to discuss the Department of Law, Neighborhood and Community Services budgets. In addition, we discussed Resolution 107, 101, 24R, and that passed out of committee with a positive recommendation. Coming up, we'll be meeting this Wednesday, October 23rd at 5:30 in these chambers to discuss the Department of Water budget, General Services, and Engineering. We will also discuss Resolution 82, 81, 24R. The following week, we will meet on Tuesday, October 29th to discuss the CPRB and the debt report. And we will also meet on Wednesday, October 30th to discuss bond ordinances and a general budget discussion. Those that came to speak tonight will have a second public hearing and an opportunity to speak on the budget on Monday, November 4th at 7 o'clock here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Planning Committee will be meeting on the 28th of this Monday, the 28th of October. We have a heavy agenda with 4 different pieces of business we'll be seeing in front of us, including the franchise agreement that we spoke about earlier today and appointments to the Sustainability Committee. So we hope to have the meeting done within an hour and a half, but it will be a lengthy one. So a good one if you want to see a couple of these legislations pushed through. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more reports, standing committees? Seeing none. Move on to considerations of ordinances. Mr. Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice ordinance 29-102-24 and ask for its introduction.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the ordinance?
An ordinance amending Article 4, Utility Pole Regulations of Chapter 171, Electricity of the Code of the City of Albany in relation to ensuring the quick and effective removal of double poles.
Thank you. Mr. Kimbrough?
Thank you, Mr. President. Referral to the Council's General Service Committee.
Thank you. Continuing on ordinance introduced, Ms. Frederick?
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice ordinances 30-102-24 through ordinance 64-102-24 for introduction.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the ordinances?
All right, get your popcorn out, everybody. I got my water. Yes, I do. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $937,500 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $937,500 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Department of Law Legal Settlements. Ordinance 31-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $762,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $494,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering Washington Park traffic reconfiguration. Ordinance 32-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $1 million and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $1 million serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering traffic speed reduction. Ordinance 33-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $330,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $330,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering maintenance equipment. Ordinance 34-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $150,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $150,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering traffic studies. Ordinance 35-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $300,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $300,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering roadway striping. 36-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $1,100,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $1,100,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering traffic signals improvements. Ordinance 37-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $180,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $180,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering traffic printers. Ordinance 38-102-24. An ordinance amending Ordinance 56-102-24, which authorizes certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $500,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $500,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Traffic engineering traffic signals by increasing the authorization to $1,500,000. Ordinance 39-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $650,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $650,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering streetlights capital improvements. Ordinance 40-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $100,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $100,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS greenhouse replacements. Ordinance 41-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $3,366,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $3,366,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS waste management plan. Ordinance 42-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $2,747,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $2,747,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS maintenance equipment. Ordinance 43-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $1 million and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $1 million serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS public bathrooms. Ordinance 44-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $1,178,000 and authorizing the lease financing or issuance of $1,178,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS Hudson River Gateways. Ordinance 45-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $500,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $500,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS Security Fence Installation. Ordinance 46-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $250,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $250,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS Streetscapes and Park Fixtures. Ordinance 47-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $340,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $340,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS Equipment Fixtures. Ordinance 48-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases of the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $450,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $450,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS Capitol Hills Rehabilitation and Improvements. Ordinance 49-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $300,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $300,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS Storage Sheds. Ordinance 50-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $1 million and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $1 million serial bonds of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering ADA compliance. Ordinance 51-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $600,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $600,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering sidewalk reconstruction. Ordinance 52-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $5 million and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $5 million serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Engineering street reconstruction. Ordinance 53-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $3,210,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $3,210,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. DGS Solid Waste Vehicles and Equipment. Ordinance 54-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $1,500,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $1,500,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Information Technology Enterprise Resource Planning System. Ordinance 55-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $750,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $750,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. APD Public Safety IT Systems. Ordinance 56-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $500,000 and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $500,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. APD Police Station Infrastructure Improvements. Ordinance 57-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the city of Albany, New York at a maximum estimated cost of $300,000 in authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $300,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. APD motor vehicles. Ordinance 58-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $1,750,000, and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $1,750,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. AFD fire vehicles. Ordinance 59-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $300,000, and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $300,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. AFD fire station infrastructure improvements. Ordinance 60-102-24. An ordinance amending ordinance number 66-102-24, which authorizes certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $10 million, and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $12 million serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Recreation West Hill Community Center by increasing such authorization to $18,500,000. Ordinance 61-102-24. An ordinance amending ordinance 23, which authorizes certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $5 million, and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $7,400,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Recreation West Hill Community Center by increasing such authorizations to $7,750,000. Okay. We'll come back. Okay. I'll keep reading, then we'll amend. Okay. Ordinance 62-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $1,220,000, and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $1,220,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Recreation playgrounds. Ordinance 63-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases of the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $390,000, and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $390,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Recreation spray pads. Ordinance 64-102-24. An ordinance authorizing certain purchases by the City of Albany, New York, at a maximum estimated cost of $150,000, and authorizing the lease financing or the issuance of $150,000 serial bond of said city to pay the cost thereof. Recreation maintenance equipment.
Mr. Kimbrough.
Thank you, Mr. President. They'll be referred to the Council's Finance Committee.
Mr. President.
Chair will recognize Ms. Frederick. Thank you.
Yes, point of clarification. I'd like to amend on the floor 61-102-24. Our title reads that it is for West Hill Community Center, but that one is for Hoffman, if you look at the detail of the ordinance.
Okay. Whew. Whew. So this is yours. Okay. Whew. Thank you. Thank you for that. Lowered my blood pressure. Thank you, Mr. Kimbrough. And I think that's all for the ordinance. Mr. Kimbrough.
Now, what was that? What were those numbers again?
Well, I thought it was 25 million, but she said one is for Hoffman.
For Hoffman.
Okay.
61-102-102 is not for West Hill, it's for Hoffman.
It's for Hoffman.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why.
Thank you, Mr. President. Those are referred to the Council's Finance Committee.
Thank you. And that's all for ordinance. Mr. Kimbrough?
Thank you. The rest of the ordinances on the agenda are held.
Thank you. Moving on to introduction of resolutions. Mr. Anani?
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice Resolution 117-102-24R and ask for passage on a roll call thereon.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
A resolution of the Common Council declaring October 20th to be Community Media Day in the city of Albany.
Mr. Nani?
Yeah, this is a resolution that we pass year in and year out on the council, and I know that everyone on the council will be supporting this resolution. I think it's important that, like my council member said earlier, that we utilize all the tools that we have to inform the Albany public about everything that's happening within City Hall, but also sharing information. So again, I want to thank my colleagues on supporting this resolution, and I want to thank Fire Race for continuing to be a mouthpiece for such an important issue here in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Adams.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Sponsors?
Yes.
Sorry, I missed that, council members. So this will be a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Continuing on, Mr. Nani.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice Resolution 118-102-24 and ask for passage on a roll call thereon.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
A resolution of the Common Council declaring October 21st, 2024 through October 27th, 2024 as Free Speech Week in the city of Albany.
Discussion on this, Mr. Nani.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. As we consider this resolution declaring free speech, we as council should reflect upon the meaning and the purpose of it. Do we pass this resolution in order to put pats on ourselves in the back and go home to our constituents and say we accomplished something today? Or is this something that we pass because we as elected officials truly want to affirm and support this essential human right that is one of our backbones of our democracy? Freedom of speech is one of the most fundamentally right granted to us in the United States. It allows for each of us to express our ideas, to disagree without fear of retaliation, to a free democratic society. This resolution, as it ran, states that the Common Council, as representatives of the people of Albany, recognize their appreciation and support this fundamental freedom that we as council want to restart and remind to our city of the importance of freedom of speech. This resolution will likely pass unanimously, support from this council. But one can ask, how many of us will truly embrace the intent our founding fathers had when crafting this First Amendment, when it's applied to everyday lives of the people under our jurisdiction? Do we pass this resolution tonight, then tomorrow continue the practice of reserving the expression of free speech to groups who can't afford to pay a permit and punish those who can't arbitrarily fines? The great abolitionist Frederick Douglass once said, "Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprive agitation are people who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the roars of these many waters." The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes to nothing without a demand. It never did and never will. I'm proud to support this resolution because freedom of speech is one of the most important foundations of democracy. Further, as a Democratic elected representative, I pledge to defend and support that right, no matter how inconvenient it might be for some people. Thank you.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. President. I notice Resolution 119-102-24R and ask for its introduction.
A resolution of the Common Council appointing Emily Swaik as a member of the Community Police Review Board.
Seeing none, can the clerk call the roll?
Oh, it's an introduction.
Oh, it is. Oh, yes. Mr. Kimbrough.
Thank you, Mr. President. This referral to Council's Public Safety Committee.
Thank you. Mr. Hoey.
Thank you again, Mr. President. This one is a pass. Let me notice it first. Resolution 120-102-24R.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
A resolution of the Common Council reappointing Milton Emmanuel Arroyo as a member of the Community Police Review Board.
Thank you. This says under consideration, but is this an introduction as well? Mr. Hoey.
Thank you again, Mr. President. Yes, we just appointed Milton a month ago. He was finishing up the term for Matt Ingram, who served on the CPRB, and at this moment, I want to thank Matt for all the work he did for almost 2 full terms on the CPRB. Actually, he had served somebody else's term. But Milton's jumped right in, feet running, and I've gotten feedback from members of the CPRB how happy they are that he is part of he's joined and he's willing to work, and he's doing a good job already, and we hope that he'll continue to do a good job. And Milton is here tonight if you want to just stand up and say hello. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Adams.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Anani. Valorant.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Farrell.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Flynn.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Frederick.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Hoey.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Kimbrough.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Love.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Romero. Zamer.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
12 in the affirmative.
Resolution passes. Continuing on with introduction resolutions, Ms. Romero.
Mr. President, I noticed Resolution 121-102-24R and ask for its introduction and passage via roll call vote.
Thank you. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
A resolution of the Common Council urging the New York State government to pass a budget in 2025 that raises taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers and funds investments.
Thank you. Discussion on this resolution, Ms. Romero.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution supports a package of bills that would tax the literal billionaires of New York State, and with that, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue that we'd be able to receive by increasing taxes for the billionaires in New York State. We would be able to fund programming that would increase affordable housing, increase the intensity and depth of healthcare, childcare, public education, and address our climate crisis and mental health crisis by having hundreds of millions more dollars to do so. It's unfair that during the COVID pandemic, the wealthiest New Yorkers got richer, and those that are middle class and blue-collar workers were actually struggling financially. This package of bills includes 4 different pieces of legislation that would do, just as I mentioned, taxing the top billionaires in New York State by making them pay their fair share to invest in programming that's needed. Hoping we can all sign on as sponsors and hoping to advocate for this type of investment next year.
Thank you, Ms. Romero. Any further discussions? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Adams.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Anani.
Yes.
Valorant.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Farrell.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Flynn.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Frederick.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Hoey.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Johnson.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Kimbrough.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Love.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Romero. Zamer.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
12 in the affirmative.
Resolution passes. Moving on to resolutions held.
Mr. Wilson, Nani wants to be co-sponsor now?
No, you won't. Told you. Moving on to resolutions held. Ms. Zamer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to notice Resolution 545324R and ask for its passage.
Yes. Can the clerk please read the resolution?
A resolution of the Common Council encouraging our community to support the Equal Rights Amendment.
Is there any discussion on this resolution? Ms. Zamer.
Thank you, Mr. President. The prime sponsor of this, Councilmember Megan Keegan, was unable to be here for a family obligation, and she asked if I would read her remarks. So these are her words. This Saturday marks the start of early voting here in New York State. This year, we not only have the opportunity to make history by voting to elect a woman to the office president for the first time in the history of the U.S., but we will also have a chance to make history here in New York State by passing the Equal Rights Amendment. While the New York State Constitution prohibits discrimination based on race and religion, there are no such protections for gender, sexual orientation, national origin, and other such protected classes. The push for a full equal rights amendment to the United States Constitution has been over a century in the making, with 22 states having ratified the expansion of our federal rights to include gender and gender discrimination. The amendment on the ballot this year, also known as Proposition 1, not only encompasses the vision for equality for women that suffragettes first drafted in 1923, it expands those protections to include our LGBTQ+ community, access to reproductive health care, and equality under the law for other protected classes as defined by our state human rights law. Over the last several weeks, I have received numerous concerns regarding the ERA about transgender children in sports and locker rooms, parental rights, and qualifications for voting. Certain media has once again created fear-based myths to discourage voters from supporting a law that simply ensures that all New Yorkers have equal rights and equal protections under state law, protections that white cisgender men have held since the creation of our great nation. Reproductive rights have been rolled back across the country in state after state due to the overturning of Roe v. Wade. Mothers have been left to die due to abortion restrictions that limit access to life-saving care. Now more than ever, we need to ensure that all birthing parents in New York have access to reproductive health care, reproductive autonomy, and that they're protected under the law. With the rise of homophobia and laws restricting rights to gender expression and gender-affirming care, the rise of xenophobia toward immigrants, voters in New York have an opportunity to ensure that our state remains a place where love is love, where we embrace our neighbors, and continue to build a diverse community where all have an opportunity to flourish. I encourage my colleagues to join me in supporting the ERA and encouraging our community to do the same.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Adams.
Yes.
Anani.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Ballerin.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Farrell.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Flynn.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Frederick.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Hoey.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Johnson.
Yes.
Kimbrough.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
Love.
Yes, co-sponsor.
Romero. Zamer.
Yes, co-sponsor, please.
12 in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice Resolution 107, 101, 24R and ask for its passage.
Can the clerk please read the resolution?
A resolution of the Common Council approving a transfer of budget funds and a change in the authorized positions included in the 2024 city budget, which will affect a salary rate or salary total.
Discussion on this resolution. Seeing none, can the clerk please call the roll?
Adams.
Yes.
Anani.
Yes.
Ballerin.
Yes.
Farrell.
Yes.
Flynn.
Yes.
Frederick.
Yes.
Hoey.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Kimbrough.
Yes.
Love.
Yes.
Romero. Zamer.
Yes.
12 in the affirmative.
Resolution passes. That ends that portion of resolutions. Moving on to miscellaneous and other business, we have Ms. Farrell, Commissioner of Deeds. Ms. Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. President. I notice the following persons be and hereby appointed Commissioner of Deeds for the City of Albany, New York for the term ending December 31st, 2024, and waive the reading of the names.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. And Mr. Hoey?
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the following person be appointed Violence Prevention Task Force member and waive the reading of the name.
Is there a second on that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Mr.
I have a
Kimbrough?
motion. I actually have a motion.
Pardon
Okay?
me?
A motion. All right. Make a motion to direct the city clerk to close city council supervised offices on Friday, November 29th, Thursday, December 26th, and Friday, December 27th. Purpose, our staff has family too. It's usually a ghost town around here at that time, and they'll be utilizing their own time to be off. It's not vacation time or anything like that. So that's the motion.
Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. I thought I saw Mr. Nani's hand up. Ms.
Yeah,
Lane? Unfinished business?
just want to talk briefly about some of the, during public comment, I just want to talk a little bit about rent in the city of Albany. Rent have risen faster than anything else over the past few years in Albany. They say that if we allow more housing to be built, rent will come down, you know, supply and demand. Well, we've been doing that, building a record number of housing developments year after year, and yet rent is still going up. Something is broken, Mr. President, and the continued reliance on the free market to fix this is not enough. It's time for the government to step in and do something for the thousands of Albany residents who increasingly can't afford to keep a roof over their head. And that is why, you know, individuals that come here are so passionate about this vacancy study that we allocated for. And any delay is a delay in those people who are struggling in our city. Particularly when I had the opportunity to go in some of the wards as I was running for assembly. I saw so many families who are, you know, you even see families who are living in the unfinished basements in many of our neighborhoods, not even having bed sheets. You know, people are struggling in silence in this city, and any way that we can help working families is a step in the right direction. Because there needs to be stability in the rent when it's being increased. Is the right thing to do, is the moral thing to do. And I know that there are so many people who agree, and we definitely have to keep speaking up in these budget times. We cannot be silent. And I know that there are some people who think that, you know, asking for this $125,000 to be set aside is a statement saying that we don't support the study. That is not it. We want to set this money aside for other reasons outside of that. You know, there are reasons as, you know, battling court decisions that are being made. But I fully support, and I hope my colleagues really support me and others on this, that we set this money aside. There are people in this city who are struggling in silence, and we need to help them as fast as we can. Every delay is a support for homelessness in our city. So I urge my colleagues, let's do the right thing. Let's help tenants, because housing is a human right. Thank you.
Mr. Adams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few things to speak on from this evening's meeting. First, just wanted to thank Albany Safe Water for coming out and providing the information. With the information that they provided this evening, just want to continue to remind council members to be open-minded and to do your thorough research into the information that's being provided to you through the graphs, through the emails, through that 80-page document. I'm working my way through it to make sure I understand, but again, for people who truly care about this issue, and as lawmakers, I would encourage you to please read that, to be informed, to make decisions. But one of the things that stood out to me this evening from what I've been learning from the ruling is, one, the definition of unreasonable risk. Unreasonable risk is a term used to describe a situation where the probability of harm is high enough that a reasonable person would expect it to occur. And this can be used in many different ways and contexts. That is the same language that the EPA used to describe the findings that we've been speaking about, unreasonable risk. That term itself, when you think about it logically, morally, if you know something is unreasonable and it is a high probability that it will have risk, why put people in unintended harm? We're forcing or pushing this fluoridation on people when the facts have not been concluded yet. The science is always going to be science where you can, again, argue on both sides. But again, I bring you back to the moral side of things because we seem to be very focused on morals and how things should work. And how things should work, it should be up to the public to be able to weigh in on this decision. The fact that we as lawmakers are making the decision for residents here in the city, it is very unfair. Not everyone believes in fluoridation. Some people do. But to make the decision for people, to take away people's autonomy, as we were just speaking about people's rights, people's bodies. People should have the right to choose what they put in their bodies and what they do not want in their bodies. This is an issue by us making this hard decision. So again, I ask council members to keep an open mind. Please do your research and think about the unreasonable risk that we're putting our children, grandchildren in, because fluoridating the water right now, it will take years for us to see the impact and effect that it has on dental care for children. But what we do know is that the impact on mothers, on infants, does exist. It's over stimulating people's bodies, because at the end of the day, we do not also know people's dietary restrictions or what they do or what they take, what they eat. We may be putting fluoride in the water when an individual may be getting too much fluoride because it's in their toothpaste, it's in their juices, it's in multiple things of their food. And these are the same things that we're giving to our kids. And so a child's body, an infant's body, and an adult's body all are different sizes. So if you're concentrating that 0.7% of fluoride in the water, for an adult, that may be okay, but for that small child, for that mother who's using, that's not breastfeeding, is using formula, and she's using fluoridated water for her baby, that is going to be a problem. That has been shown to be a problem, and that's where the problem lies. One other last thing to mention about the fluoridation and its effectiveness, because the graph that was provided shows the correlation of effectiveness within the past 30 years. But one of the things that I've also learned is that with fluoridation, fluoridation is more effective when it's used as a topical, not ingested. When you ingest it, it actually makes it least effective. So the issue that we're trying to address, we're actually doing the opposite by having children and people ingest it. We have low-costing fluoridated items that have this stuff already in it. I would encourage us to, one, slow down, pause, let's think about this more, address this in committee, have the public really be a part of this conversation before we move forward with this. And lastly, in regards to the rent being too high, as a renter who's been living in the city for a very long time, I totally agree. But I will also say that it is the regulations through municipalities that are making housing more difficult. We need to be, again, more careful, more intentional about the decisions that we're making here in the chambers and the impact that it has. Because when you have regulations very high, it still is going to push landlords, developers away. Landlords are going to continue to try to find loopholes, and the only way to address that is to address the problem at its root causes. So I think we need to make sure that as a council, as a city, that we are making the best decisions for residents and making thoughtful decisions when we're here in these chambers. Thank you.
Mr. Johnson and then Mr. Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. President. And it's a great way to follow up the last point that the councilman made, because I sat in this chambers 5 years ago, 6 years ago, complaining about 1 and 2 bedroom housing that was built in the new developments that hit our city, and they really didn't address the need for 3 bedrooms and large families. So we do need to be mindful of the decisions that we make, because they come back and bite us. Right now, people who are looking for apartments, there is a slim options for them. And what I'm seeing is the same apartments that one family is getting shut down by codes, and then they do a little bit of work to them, and then it's another family going into these same apartments. So that's something that not only is the rent high, but for a certain group of people, the services that come with the rent that they're paying don't match and equal out. So I think that we need to be mindful that we still have 3 buildings in the second ward that are standing high that can serve a much greater need standing up than being knocked down. So once again, I'm calling on a developer, someone who can finance the project to do what's right for the city of Albany, for the people that are in need of housing. It doesn't make sense that we have all these people out in the city homeless without housing, and we are not taking advantage of structures that are already standing. Thank you.
Mr. Ballard.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank everybody for the time, and I want to thank everyone who came out and spoke today. You know, I think what was pretty clear was that the housing issue is still a major issue in our city. And I think we've done a lot to try to address different components of it. And I think we should be proud of that work that we've done. But every time we've made progress, I've always made very clear it's just one tool in our toolbox. Inclusionary housing was one tool in our toolbox. Good cause eviction is one tool in our toolbox. Rent stabilization is another tool. Just to be clear, this would only affect larger developments. I think it's 8 units or more. It would only affect buildings that were built before the 1970s. So it wouldn't affect any new development. Just like good cost didn't affect any new development from anything that was built after 2009. So, you know, I think we as a council should be very proud of the work we've done on this issue. I'm very proud of the 3 finance chairs that I have been able to serve with have been critical of getting us to this point. Former Councilwoman Judy Doche, who was the first finance chair, she was the one who put the first resolution forward to get this moving forward. Then Councilwoman Phil and Councilwoman Frederick have been critical in finding the fundings to be able to get us to where we are. So we have always had the support from those who are the most in the weeds on our finances of our council members, because all respect to all of our membership, the financiers are the ones that are in the weeds the most year in and year out. So I'm confident that as we move this conversation forward, that we can do the work that's needed to find those funds that are being brought, the funds that are being brought forward as a request. Again, the request is to make sure we have resources in case the survey goes one way or the other way. It doesn't matter which way it goes. There's going to be shockwaves that are going to need resources to absorb those shockwaves. We as a council voted to put this on last year. We knew it was a controversial bill. And now that we're getting to the cuff of that report, I believe we have an obligation to make sure we have the resources to handle those shockwaves that are going to come from the report. And I want to thank this body. I want to thank all of the individuals and all of the former financiers that have gotten us this far. And, you know, I think that's important to mention, because sometimes we have all of these requests when it comes to budget time. But it's those members that have to go behind the closed doors to get it figured out. And I appreciate that work that's been done year in and year out. I also appreciate all the work that this body has done year in and year out to get those votes, to be able to overcome some heavier hurdles. And last year, this was a heavier hurdle to get over, and we did it. So I'm hoping that we can find that strength again to get over this hurdle. Make sure we have the resources to absorb the shocks that are going to come from the report. And I also want to just say one other thing. You know, we get beat up a lot on a lot of issues, and I get that. But on this one, I think we have a lot to be proud of. And I think we have a lot to be proud of the work that we've done to try to address these issues and to try to do it in a fair way. So I appreciate that from all my colleagues, and hope you all have a good night.
Kimbrough?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. I like that. Teamwork makes the dream work.